Your brain doesn't show you reality. It shows you a version of reality it already decided on before you finish thinking. Every conclusion you've ever reached, every opinion you hold, every decision you've made, filtered, not by facts, by cognitive biases you didn't choose and probably can't name. This video is about the ones running your life right now. Confirmation bias. You already believe something. Maybe it's about politics. Maybe it's about a person you don't like. Maybe it's about yourself. Now, watch what your brain does next. It searches for evidence that confirms what it already believes. It ignores evidence that doesn't. It doesn't feel like filtering. It feels like discovering the truth. Confirmation bias is the brain's tendency to seek, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms existing beliefs. It doesn't require effort. It happens automatically, below awareness, before you have a chance to evaluate anything fairly. Studies show that people spend significantly more time reading articles that agree with their views than articles that challenge them. They rate the same piece of evidence as more convincing when it supports their position. They remember facts that fit their worldview more accurately than facts that don't. The dangerous part isn't that you believe wrong things. It's that confirmation bias makes wrong beliefs feel more supported over time. Every day your brain quietly builds a stronger case for whatever you already think. The world starts to look like proof. It isn't. It's a mirror. The Dunning-Kruger Effect. The less you know about something, the more confident you feel about it. The more you learn, the less certain you become. This isn't a paradox. It's one of the most replicated findings in psychology. The Dunning-Kruger Effect describes a pattern where people with limited knowledge in a domain dramatically overestimate their competence. Beginners don't know enough to recognize what they don't know. The gaps in their understanding are invisible to them. As expertise grows, something uncomfortable happens. You start to see the complexity. You understand how much remains uncertain. You realize how many exceptions exist. Confidence drops. Experts in a field are often the most hesitant to make sweeping claims, not because they know less, but because they know exactly how much they're still missing. The person who read one article about nutrition and now confidently corrects doctors at dinner. The person who watched a documentary about economics and has solved global poverty in their head. They're not stupid. They're at the beginning of a curve they don't know they're on. The availability heuristic. Your brain judges how likely something is based on how easily an example comes to mind. If you can think of it quickly, your brain assumes it must be common. If examples are hard to find, your brain assumes it's rare. This is the availability heuristic, and it means your entire sense of risk is shaped by what you've recently seen, heard, or experienced, not by actual statistics. Plane crashes receive enormous media coverage. Shark attacks make international news. Both are statistically rare causes of death, but because they're vivid and memorable, your brain treats them as significant dangers. Meanwhile, heart disease kills vastly more people every year and gets a fraction of the attention. You don't fear it the same way because you can't picture it happening. This bias affects where people choose to live, which diseases they worry about, how they vote, and which risks they take seriously. Your brain is running a threat assessment based on your personal highlight reel of scary stories, not on data. Anchoring bias. The first number you hear becomes a reference point that influences every judgment you make afterward. It doesn't matter if that number is relevant. It doesn't matter if it's accurate. It just has to come first. This is anchoring bias, and it operates in almost every decision involving numbers. Salary negotiations, prices, medical estimates, legal sentences. In one study, people were asked to spin a wheel that randomly stopped on either 10 or 65. Then they were asked to estimate the percentage of African countries in the United Nations. People who spun 65 gave significantly higher estimates than people who spun 10. The wheel had nothing to do with the question. The number entered their mind first. That was enough. Car salespeople use this. Real estate agents use this. You see a product listed at $400, then crossed out and replaced with $180. You feel like you're saving money. You're not responding to the $180. You're responding to the gap between $400 and $180. The anchor did its job before you even realized you were being influenced. The sunk cost fallacy. You've spent 3 hours at a restaurant waiting for a table. You're not even hungry anymore. You could leave, but you've already waited 3 hours, so you stay. You've been in a relationship for 4 years. It's been unhealthy for 2 of them. You know it should end. But 4 years is a long time, so you stay. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue an investment of time, money, or emotion because of what you've already put in, rather than what you stand to gain going forward. The resources already spent cannot be recovered. They're gone regardless of what you do next. Rational decision-making says the past is irrelevant. Only future outcomes should matter. But the brain doesn't work that way. Abandoning something you've invested in feels like waste. Continuing feels like honoring the investment. So you keep watching a bad movie because you already paid for the ticket. You keep using software that doesn't work because you spent months learning it. You stay in situations that are costing you more than they're giving because leaving feels like admitting the original decision was wrong. The sunk cost isn't a reason to continue. It's a reason the brain manufactures to avoid the discomfort of loss. The halo effect. You meet someone attractive. Within seconds, before they've said a single word, your brain has made assumptions about their intelligence, their competence, their personality, and their trustworthiness. You didn't decide to do this. Your brain did it automatically. The halo effect is the tendency for one positive trait to influence perception of all other traits. Attractiveness is the most studied version, but it extends to everything. A well-dressed person seems more credible. A confident speaker seems more knowledgeable. A charismatic leader seems more competent. Research on teacher evaluations found that students consistently rated more physically attractive professors as more intelligent, more organized, and better teachers before the semester even began. Job candidates who are taller earn on average more over their careers. Politicians who look more competent in photographs win elections at rates above chance. The reverse is equally true. One negative trait casts a shadow over everything else. This is called the horn effect. A person who makes one visible mistake gets judged more harshly across every dimension. You see the halo. You don't see the person. In-group bias. You trust people who are like you more than people who aren't. You judge their mistakes more charitably. You remember their positive actions more clearly. You give them the benefit of the doubt automatically. This is in-group bias, and it doesn't require anything dramatic to activate. Studies show it triggers based on the most trivial divisions. People assigned to arbitrary teams in experiments within minutes show measurable preference for their own group over the other. In-group bias shapes hiring decisions. It shapes who gets believed in legal disputes. It shapes which communities receive aid after disasters and which ones wait longer. It operates in every human institution because humans built those institutions, and humans are running this bias constantly in the background. The uncomfortable truth is that in-group bias feels like loyalty. It feels like good judgment. The problem is that the definition of like you is constructed by the brain, not by reality. And it tends to align with whatever group you happen to be born into. The negativity bias. Bad events hit harder than good events of equal size. Losing $20 hurts more than finding $20 feels good. One harsh criticism lands harder than 5 compliments feel good. One bad day colors a week more than one good day lifts it. This is negativity bias. The brain is wired to pay more attention to negative information than positive. It processes threats faster. It stores negative memories more vividly. It weighs losses more heavily than equivalent gains. This bias evolved for survival. In an uncertain environment, missing a threat was fatal. Missing a reward was just disappointing. The brain learned to treat potential dangers as more important than potential benefits. The problem is that the modern world is not a survival environment. The same bias that kept early humans alive now makes people ruminate on one bad review while ignoring 50 good ones. It makes relationships feel defined by arguments rather than years of connection. Your brain is not broken. It's running old software on a new world. The bystander effect. Someone collapses on a busy street. Dozens of people walk past. Nobody helps. In a different scenario, the same person collapses on an empty street. One person sees it and immediately acts. More witnesses does not mean more help. It means less. This is the bystander effect. When responsibility is distributed across a crowd, each individual feels less personally accountable. Someone else will handle it. Someone else probably already called, someone else is more qualified. The diffusion of responsibility is invisible while it happens. Nobody thinks they're choosing not to help. They think they're assuming someone else already has. The result is that emergencies in public spaces with large crowds often receive slower responses than emergencies with a single witness. This isn't cowardice, it's a cognitive pattern. Studies show that simply being aware of the bystander effect significantly increases intervention rates. The bias weakens when people understand it's operating. The fundamental attribution error. Someone cuts you off in traffic. They're reckless, aggressive, a bad person who drives like they own the road. You cut someone off in traffic, you were distracted, you're running late. It was a momentary mistake that doesn't reflect who you are. The fundamental attribution error is the tendency to explain other people's behavior through their character while explaining your own behavior through circumstances. When others fail, it's because of who they are. When you fail, it's because of what happened. This bias shows up everywhere. The employee who's late to work is lazy. When you're late, the traffic was terrible. The bias is not about being hypocritical. It's about the asymmetry of information. You know your own context. You don't know theirs. Optimism bias. Most people believe they are less likely than average to get divorced, develop cancer, or be involved in a serious accident. Statistically, that cannot be true for most people, but most people believe it anyway. Optimism bias is the tendency to overestimate the likelihood of positive events and underestimate the likelihood of negative ones, specifically as they apply to yourself. Other people get sick. Other people's businesses fail. Other people's relationships fall apart. Yours will be different. This bias is not entirely harmful. Optimism bias drives people to start businesses, pursue ambitious goals, and take necessary risks. But it also leads to underestimating the time and resources projects require. The bias protects motivation while distorting planning. The result is people who start well and prepare poorly. The bandwagon effect. The more people believe something, the more likely you are to believe it too. Not because you've evaluated the evidence, because popularity feels like proof. The bandwagon effect is the tendency to adopt beliefs and behaviors because others have. It intensifies as the number of adopters grows. Your brain interprets widespread belief as social validation, and social validation as evidence of truth. The crowd is often right, but the crowd is also what makes bubbles, panics, and mass delusions possible. Millions of people believing something throughout history has never, on its own, made it correct. The spotlight effect. You said something slightly awkward at a party 3 nights ago. You've thought about it 17 times since. You're certain everyone noticed. You're certain they remember. They don't. The spotlight effect is the tendency to overestimate how much other people notice and think about your behavior, appearance, and mistakes. Research consistently shows that the observable impact of embarrassing events is noticed by far fewer people than the person experiencing them estimates. And those who do notice forget far sooner than expected. Most people are not your audience. They're the lead in their own story, too busy with their own performance to critique yours. Status quo. Bias. Given the choice between keeping things as they are and changing them, most people prefer to keep things as they are, even when the evidence clearly favors change. Status quo bias is the tendency to prefer the current state of affairs. Departures from it feel like losses. Staying feels safe, even when staying is costing more than changing would. Research on organ donation shows that countries where donation is the default have dramatically higher rates than countries where donation requires active sign-up. The only difference is which option requires action. Inaction wins. Your brain mistakes familiarity for correctness and inertia for safety. Most of what you've never changed hasn't been evaluated. It's just been left alone. Your brain built these shortcuts over millions of years. They are not flaws. They are adaptations that worked in environments very different from the one you live in now. The problem isn't that you have cognitive biases. Every human does. The problem is operating as if you don't. Knowing their names doesn't eliminate them, but it creates a moment, brief, valuable, between the bias firing and the decision being made. That moment is the only place where something different becomes possible.